Welcome back to the Alchemical Life podcast. You guys, I am joined today with a guest that I just am so excited to talk to pick his brain. He's somebody that I got to officially meet at the Coach Mub conference that I went to in Austin, Texas. And he's just an incredible athlete. He's just an all around freak, to be honest. His name's Alec Blenis, and he is what you would consider a true hybrid athlete. He is an endurance runner, and he's also getting really freaky good at Olympic lifts, but he's just crazy strong, loves to lift, loves to run. Honestly, he's just one of those guys that loves to train, and he's really passionate about it. He's a great coach. He's passionate about learning more about training. And so today is my conversation with him, just picking his brain. He was kind enough to come on the podcast. I reached out to him not to podcast with me, but to pay for a coaching call. And he said, yeah, so I could charge this much, or we could just talk on the podcast. And I was like, you're the man. So this conversation that you guys are about to hear is my conversation with Alec Blenis, but I really think you guys are going to get a lot out of this. You guys stay tuned. Alec Blenis, he's coming on. All right, man. What's up?
Not a whole lot. I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna just warn you, I was sick earlier this week and I was on a call with someone yesterday and lost my voice partway through, which has never happened to me. I'm like, I'm so sorry I can't talk. So I should be good. I'm just trying to make it through. But yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, thanks for coming on. I want to first ask you, what are you currently training for? Also, shout out to the shirt. Shout out to the shirt for
Yeah,
people who are watching.
performance enhancing drip. There you go. Um,
Love it.
I am training for, I guess if I had to narrow it down, I'm training to be the most aesthetic marathoner that I can be. So I'm trying to get faster like the marathon, and hopefully pack on some more lean mass and just like have the biggest arms at the finish line. Is kind of my primary objective. I'm 3 weeks out from Twin Cities Marathon, where I'm hoping to go sub 240, maybe sub 242. We'll see. Um, and then yeah, in the gym, just kind of like it's a lot of GPP stuff. I'm doing some Oli lifting, doing some bicep curls. Just kind of trying to not suck at anything too bad.
Dude, are you okay? So you did grandma's. That was, by the way, I feel like everybody had a pretty brutal race. That day, the weather was like nobody knew it was going to happen. But you got, what was it, like a 248?
Yeah, 248 in the brutal heat. That was a rough day for sure. So I'm hoping with
Oh,
with
God.
cooler weather should give me a couple minutes. And um, I recently decided, it sounds dumb to say it out loud, but I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just trained like really hard, you know? So it's crazy, like super weird idea. Um, but like I don't know how many of us are like actually like all in, you know? I feel like you can't like especially if you have a real life and a job and like a family, it's like you're probably not all in on training all the time. And I was kind of like, let's just go all in. It's gonna be fun. Let's give it a rip. So for probably just like 8 weeks now, I've been like really all in on running. My mileage has gone up pretty significantly, probably at a slightly irresponsible rate even, but feeling good so far. Um, and yeah, hoping to take a couple minutes off last time.
Yeah, my client Katie, who I told you about at the Coach 'em Up conference, she ran grandma's too, and honestly, her fitness was definitely sub. She got like a 249, but her fitness was definitely sub 249. It was just a brutal race. Also, there was another guy, Kirk DeWint, who's I'm sure you know him
Yeah,
from the running public. I think they know you. Yeah, he DNF'd, and I know that it was. He talks about how he goes back and forth. He was like, I had a bad day, like, and I was injured, but like it was also just horrible. Like it was just a horrible race day for everybody, I think. But
the
you actually
start
led
was
me.
crazy. It was so hot just standing at the start, like dripping sweat. I was like,
Well, and also
this is
wasn't
not
it
good.
delayed? Like
Yeah,
wasn't it delayed like 40 minutes?
yeah, because there was storms, so it was so humid. Like it had stormed so heavily the night before, and then got delayed. And so like we went out in the morning, and like the road was still wet and like steamy. And so you're just like standing in a steam room, like dripping sweat at the start line, like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to run a marathon. Um, but once you got into it, there was some cool, like, there was a couple moments where like we would catch a cool breeze off the lake, where it was like, just stay like this and be like, there was a couple good miles, and then it was like super hot again.
Well, Thank God for your heat training, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't even mean, I had no idea it was going to be so hot. Like I was just doing heat training as like a fun experiment. So I think that like saved that's saved my life.
That's awesome. I do want to. Okay, so you talked about weekly mileage, and that's something that I really want to talk with you about because I would say when you were training for grandmas, you are like your fitness still you got away with pretty low mileage for most marathoners for most people training for a marathon weekly, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on weekly mileage. I also wanted to hear your thoughts on increasing weekly mileage because you kind of pulled a little bit of a Truett Haynes, but I'm down for it. Like I love it, and
Yeah.
because I'm that way too. I look at everybody and I'm like 10% per week, but then I'll be like, all right, I did 42 miles this week, my average has been 30, so I want to hear your thoughts on weekly mileage, and then also where you think like quality in that weekly mileage matters in terms of also adding in mileage. Because I feel as though there's been a study that came out that was talking about weekly mileage versus also just like per session, how hard you're going and injury risk. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a ton to dive into there. So if we rewind to like, 248 at grandma's in the heat. Like it's a decent time. I feel like considering my mileage was only like 30 miles a week for like the 12 to 16 weeks leading into that. So it's,
right.
relatively minimal training. But to be fair, and like where people will be like, well, what about, it's like I did have a lot of cross training in that. So I was doing quite a bit of cross training volume, and a fair amount of that was like on incline as well. So if you actually look at my weekly hours, I think I averaged 7 to 8 hours of aerobic training, for that same 12 to 16 week block. So to just say 30 miles makes it sound like it's not as much. Whereas if I had been running on flat ground for all 7 or 8 of those hours, it would have ended up being quite a bit more. Um, so I think, weekly aerobic hours is one of the most important things for sure for general aerobic development. I think you can get away with lower, true miles on feet if the miles are pretty high quality and you have the actual aerobic fitness from just overall time. So I think that if you are strategic about how you do your miles, you can get away with, a lower amount than most people. And the reason that I chose to do that and only run 30 miles a week, but incorporate incline training, incorporate heat training, do a lot of cross training volume, like all of the things, is I was just keeping that eccentric stress down. I was keeping the impact down so I could push the gym as hard as I possibly could. And it worked. Like I also got some of the strongest and biggest I ever had. I was my heaviest body weight ever going into grandma's. So just trying to manage the two of them together, I found that was the best way to do it. But like looking at, there was a study that came out looking at like correlating people's training volume versus their marathon time, and then correlating their training intensity versus their marathon time. And the big finding there was that like volume is king in terms of marathon training, which I generally support that idea of like long-term volume is super, super important. But I think there's also some important caveats to talk about with that study, and why you shouldn't just force volume before you're ready for it, and why you shouldn't, throw intensity out the window either. And when it comes to the volume piece of like, if you run 60 miles a week, you're going to be running this marathon time versus 30 miles a week is this marathon time. I don't think it quite works that way, and I think some people looked at this study and kind of confused correlation and causation, where they're looking at it saying if you run X distance, you're going to run X marathon time. I would look at it and say, no, like once you're fit enough to run X marathon time, you have to do this much volume to keep improving. Um, Kind of like invert it a little bit. Because I think if you just look at that data and you're like, oh, I want to run, sub 240, so I'm going to run 60 miles a week, and you just start running 60 miles a week, if you have to sacrifice your training quality too much to hit that 60 miles, I don't think it's going to have the effect that you think it's going to have. It's not just, you can't just force yourself to run a certain marathon time by running a certain volume. So that's why what I always caution people against with training volume is like, let's progress volume at a rate that is necessary for you to keep getting faster. Let's not just give you volume because fast people do more volume. It'd be kind of like, I don't know, you look at, someone in the gym and it's like, hey, to bench 315, you should probably be able to do like 225 for,
Oh,
3 by 12.
the last thing I heard you say was, oh, you can't get away with super high. volume and just expect to get an insanely fast marathon time.
Yeah, like you can't force a certain volume just because like some study said that, on average, if you run this volume, you can run X marathon time. It'd be like just forcing yourself to do a certain strength workout or volume in the gym, expecting you're gonna all of a sudden be super big or super strong. Like you just do the work that's necessary to get you faster. So I think that it highlights like that study comparing volume versus intensity highlights the importance of progressing volume when you need it, but it's not a way to be like, oh, I want to run this time, I'm going to do this volume kind of thing. And so I think as long as you're progressing volume and your workouts are progressing, like just keep doing what you're doing kind of thing. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts on like why you shouldn't just chase volume targets. Um, but in terms of the injury piece, with like single session duration increases potentially mattering more, being more injurious than even weekly volume increases. I think as a general rule, I think that a lot of marathoners and distance athletes kind of over prioritize and over index their long run too often, and they're like obsessed with getting to the 20-mile long run, and that sort of thing versus prioritizing just weekly mileage progressions most of the time, and then treating the long run like the kind of finishing touches on their marathon fitness. Because I see a lot of like beginner marathoners who like their long run is like 50 to 60% of their weekly volume. And it's like, that's a great way to just get like really, really wrecked, on Saturday and then like recover until Wednesday and like get in one half-ass session and be like, all right, time to do another long run. Where it's like if you just took that like low weekly mileage and just did like four, high quality sessions and just forgot about the long run for a little bit, you'd probably make a lot more progress on your overall fitness. And then after like 12 weeks of that, you'd probably handle long runs way better anyway. So I think people do like too long of long runs too soon in their programming versus just trusting the power of weekly accumulation. I think it's generally safer, less likely to get hurt, and I just hate seeing people like spend half of their week recovering from one workout.
Yeah. With you, how many quality sessions are you doing per week? I know that your training has changed because now you're doing a little bit more running volume, but I want to get your thoughts on that because there are so many different camps of like how many days a week we should be doing quality and what that should look like. And um even interviewing Katie, like for her, she was like, I did two quality sessions really a week, and one of them was on my long run, and it was just adding in, marathon pace to my mileage. So, and then
Yeah.
I know people who are like, dude, I'm doing four quality sessions a week of some sort. So I really want to hear your thoughts on
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, you have like the double threshold people, right? Who like they might have four quality sessions with like two doubles or something like that. I think if you look at like the research on splitting up intensity throughout the week and see like what's most effective, I think what you generally see is that if you, all else being equal, if you take the same intensity, so like say we take a VO2 max session like 6 by 3 minutes, if we compare the training effect of that one 6 by 3 minute session versus what happens if again we keep everything the same and we just split it in half and have 2 days of 3 by 3 minutes instead of one day of 6 by 3, we see that the single 6 by 3 minute session is more potent because you like get into that like more demanding metabolic state and spend more time in it. Um, but in the real world, like not all else is necessarily equal. And if you split that volume up a little bit, maybe you can actually push a little bit harder, or maybe you're not just cutting 6 by 3 in half in the 3 by 3. Maybe if you split it in half, now you do 4 by 3 twice instead of 6 by 3 once. So I think if you leverage, greater frequency, doing four quality sessions versus two, if you leverage that to accumulate more high quality work versus just splitting the same volume up into more days, you could potentially squeeze out a little bit more stimulus there. But that also comes with the cost of like how much volume are you going to be able to accumulate if you're doing four quality sessions a week. It's going to cut into your ability to accumulate volume as well. So I think you have to understand like one, what strategies are going to get me the most return on investment in terms of per minute. And I think training like 1 or 2 days a week in terms of quality work, you're going to get a higher ROI in terms of like the benefit of each minute at intensity versus when you do kind of microdose it or spread it out a little bit, it can be a little bit less impactful and require more. Um, so I think in order to save time and leave more energy for just volume accumulation, not doing quality more than a couple times a week is probably a good sweet spot. Um, I think a possible exception to that, and there's actually some really interesting studies on this, is like short term blocks, especially with like a block periodization approach. I think you can get away with like 4 sessions, 5 sessions of quality work in a week for very short periods of time. Especially if you're coming off from like a break, for example. If like you haven't done any high intensity work in a couple of months, maybe you're coming back from an injury or something like that. I think you can potentially like it sounds kind of broy, like shock the system, right? But like you could probably do like 3 or 4 quality sessions for like a 4 week block to just kind of like get your threshold back up to a decent position and that kind of thing, and then get into something a little bit more sustainable. Um, but just because you can do it for like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I don't think that means you should do it all the time. But there are some pretty interesting examples in the literature. Like there's a super famous study from 1977. It's the VOT biggest VO2 max increase ever seen in the training cohort, where they trained all out 7 days a week for 10 weeks. Uh, and like one of them got hurt. None of them were willing to keep training after the 10 weeks was up. But
Yeah.
some of the fitness improvements were absolutely outrageous. So I think it can be done for
Yeah.
a little bit. Um, but I think for someone that's, pretty experienced and looking to sustain it all the time, I think there's a reason that most people do 2 quality sessions a week. I think there's some circumstances where 3 or 4 can be done. For me, I was closer to 3. Because I was doing a lot of that quality work on incline. Um, so it's just more recoverable in general. And that's one of the things that I actually like about incline training in general, is when you take away some of that eccentric stress and you make it a little bit more recoverable, you can push yourself a little harder, a little bit more often, without a drop in quality. Whereas if I had tried to do all 3 of those sessions on pavement outside, I probably would have felt a little too beat up and the quality would have dropped too much. So I think that's something to consider with training frequency as well. But yeah, for that 248 build on 30 miles a week, that was probably 3 quality sessions, probably 2 intervals, one like interval session, like short intervals, threshold style work,
Yeah.
and then like a tempo, incline tempo day, and then like a long run with some quality in it too.
Yeah. That's see, well, and you make so many valuable points because you're talking one about the fact that it's like there's not just it's not even just a shock the system thing with in terms of those higher quality at first. I think it's also just like fatigue builds. I feel like people think of everything as a week, like a 1 week of training. And it's like, dude, the week turns into another week, which turns
Yeah.
into another week, which turns like those weeks continue to happen. And so it's like, sure, you can handle hard training, but for how long? And for me, I did 3 quality sessions for my mile training. And anybody who knows, mile training, we were talking about it. It's actually really fucking brutal.
Yeah.
And but I did 3 quality sessions for my mile training, and there was no incline work. It was a horrible idea. It was a grave mistake because you get to the point where you're 6 weeks in and you're toast. Like everything hurts, like nothing's fun, and
Yeah.
I was still at I think 35 miles a week. So I want to hear more about your thoughts on incline training and how you implement it because it's very, very interesting to me. I want to talk to you about heat training too, because I was forced into heat training. That was not an option for me. That was a requirement because I live in Florida. But I want to hear also about incline training.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think like as one final point, before I jump into the incline stuff on like, doing 3 quality sessions a week, for example, I think someone's training history also matters a lot. And like what are you doing with your volume to facilitate the intensity? Because I think if you're someone who, for example, is running like, 60 miles a week, doing 2 quality sessions, and then you decide like I'm gonna train for the mile, if you drop from 60 miles a week to 40 miles a week, handling a third quality session is probably going to be a lot easier for you than someone who's like they didn't change their training volume, and they're just trying to now add a quality session and do 3 versus 2.
That was me.
So
That
so
was 100% me.
yeah, I think whenever you hear someone who's like, yeah, I'm training this hard this often, or like, I'm doing 4 hard workouts a week. It's like, yeah, well, make sure that you're aware of like what the bigger context of like that person's training volume, their training history. Like an athlete I used to be pretty close with, he was absolutely insane. Like he ran like 15, low 15s for the 5K. At one point, he had run a 2:16 marathon, and at the time when he was like running low 15s in the 5K, he's like, yeah, I run 17 miles a week. I'm like, what do you mean you run 17 miles a week? He's like, yeah, that's all it takes. But like this is someone who had run 100 plus miles a week for a decade. So it's like you take
Right.
someone with that sort of base, and then what sort of quality are they able to do with 17 miles a week plus some cross training? It's like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So you just got to consider all of it together, and not train like someone else is training, just from like a snapshot in time. But in terms of the incline stuff, I think the incline training is really really interesting, because I see like some disconnects between how it's being used in practice by like, one, some professional marathoners, two, a lot of like trail and mountain athletes and that kind of stuff, and then three,
Yeah.
how it's implemented and talked about, in like the physical therapy and rehab space. Because there are some interesting studies coming out on incline running, but I'm not convinced that they're all getting interpreted super well. So that might be something we can jump into a little bit, because I think anecdotally, anyone that you talk to who has done a lot of incline work generally reports the same thing, that like it feels gentler on their body. They feel like they're able to accumulate more volume or train a little bit harder, um, that kind of thing. You also hear a couple people who like will have maybe flared up their Achilles. Like there's a little bit more calf stress with it too. But I think once you get
Yeah.
over that hurdle, I think overall it feels a little bit more manageable. Um, but I think that's interesting, because when you look at um, some of the like research on incline running, a lot of it's kind of scary. Of like, there's so much like tibial load. Like if you run on an incline, you're gonna get a stress fracture. Like it sounds like very scary. Just when they're
Yeah.
measuring some of the loads for the tibia with incline training, and I think one of the reasons for that disconnect between like some of the rehab papers saying that like there's so much tibial load with incline running, and then like actual runners being like, I don't know, man, like I had chins once, but incline running actually felt better. um I think that the key difference there is some of the rehab and like research papers are not effectively comparing like real world inclines and training paces. They just like pick a what they call a slow pace on incline and compare it to a fast pace on flat ground. But like some of these paces that they're comparing, like what they call a slow pace on incline, is actually still very, very challenging sometimes. Like it's slow in there, like that's what they call it, slow. But I'm looking at it thinking like that'd be really difficult to actually do in a true workout. And then they're
Yeah.
comparing it
Like
to like,
you put an incline on a 10% grade even, and you're trying to rip for a certain amount of time. It's just like you're asking a lot of somebody, an athlete.
yeah, I don't want to misquote and like say the wrong numbers, but it was something like, comparing, you know, 4.5 or 5 miles an hour on 15% to like a
Holy sh!
7:30. To that was like their slow pace, and comparing it to like their fast pace was like a 7-minute mile on flat ground. Where I'm like, I can see why you think like a 13-minute mile is slow, but like 13-minute mile on 15% incline is a hell of a lot harder than a 7-minute mile on flat ground. So like I don't think it's a fair comparison that is always being made,
Yeah.
when they're talking about some of the tibial loads. So at the end of the day, I think you just gotta like feel it out and like try it yourself and see how it's going. Um, but I also think too, with the like calf and Achilles stuff, for me personally at least, when I've done a lot of volume on like 6 to 8%, like moderate grades, I haven't had any issues with like Achilles flare ups or foot stuff with that. When I've done more volume on steeper grades, like 12 to 15%, I have a little bit more. And I think a lot of that's going to be individual with like, your ankle range of motion and what shoes you're wearing and all that kind of stuff. But I find the moderate grades to be like really, really forgiving. I feel like 6 to 8%. It's like still fast enough that I feel like it kind of carries over to flat ground a little bit more. Like I'm still getting, good leg turnover, but it's not so steep that I feel like I'm, stretching out my Achilles like a shit ton either. So that's kind of the sweet spot that I've settled into for a lot of work. I feel like it feels really good. But yeah, my general experience with it is at least using it for like 1 or 2 sessions a week, just because I feel like, especially managing my gym training, I can get into the gym like the day after a hard incline session and still feel good. Whereas if I did that session out on the pavement and then showed up at the gym the next day, I'd be a lot more tired and feel like my gym quality would suffer. So just strategically placing like 1 or 2 incline sessions a week just to help me turn around a little faster and hit some of those sessions at higher quality, that's been the biggest reason for me to keep it in my program, even when I'm not training for a mountain race.
Yeah. What are your incline sessions looking like? Are you like, this is what I'm doing on usually a threshold day? You're actually doing, are you just sort of like letting it rip for an hour? Is it something that you're looking at mileage, or are you just going for time?
Yes, I've experimented with like a lot of different ones. My general like training approach, as like an overarching philosophy is like, general work can stay pretty general and more specific work should stay pretty specific. So when it comes to like, threshold pace, some of the more like specific, like close to race effort stuff, I like to do that, more on flat ground more often than not, like keep some of those specific sessions feeling pretty specific. Some of the stuff that's more like general or support paces, things that are not super close to race pace, like, maybe some VO2 intervals or anaerobic work. I find that works really great on a hill. Can push myself really hard for like 1 and 2 minute intervals, without feeling beat up. And I don't think it's the end of the world that like I'm not getting quite the turnover that I would on flat ground, as long as I'm getting some of those more specific threshold sessions in. And then similarly for like some of the easy volume, I don't think that all of my easy volume needs to be, you know, flat and fast. Like getting some of it in on the incline, I think is totally fine. But especially close to a race, doing some of like my marathon race pace work, that kind of thing. I try to keep that flat, flatter and faster more often than not. Um, if I'm not close to a race, I'll mix the incline into just about anything. But when I'm within like 8 to 12 weeks of a race, I kind of fall back on that, like keep general, keep specific.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that you say keep the easy days easy and the hard days hard. I That's something that I say, it's going around. I mean, a lot of people say it, but I want to hear your interpretation of easy days easy, hard days hard, and also what that looks like in a training session for you. And I'm setting you could honestly just reference your story, because that's like what the perfect example was. But
Yeah. I like the saying in general. I think some people like take it a little bit too literally, and it's been used to argue against like moderate intensity training. Um, so like I
yes,
think
so
the
true.
the idea of like easy days easy and hard days hard is not so much about training polarization and that like you should only do zone two and zone five. I think it's more about like workouts are workouts and then easy runs are easy, and like workouts, regardless of whether it's a moderate intensity, high intensity, anaerobic session, sprint session, threshold, whatever, like all of those sessions have a specific intent and a target, like a specific thing that you're trying to get out of them. So like arrange your training, adjust your easy intensity, adjust your total training volume, like do all the things that you need to do so that you can hit the target and like complete your workouts and progress your workouts. If you're progressing your workouts, then you fill in the gaps with easy volume and so on and so forth. uh, but what I hate seeing is like when people are like, do you think I'm going too slow on my easy runs? I'm like, no, you're not going, like you're just not going too slow, I promise. Like if you think you're going too slow, maybe slow down like another 15 seconds, you'll be fine. um
Right.
because like you don't realistically need to progress like your zone two paces per se, like they really are just gap fillers. Like progress your workouts, have an appropriate amount of total volume, and that's really it. In fact, I think a lot of times, you could be in a training block where your zone two or your easy paces are getting slower. like if your total volume is increasing, if you're accumulating more fatigue from, high intensity workouts and that sort of thing. Maybe at the beginning of a block, you were able to hit, 730 mile for your easy paces. And by the end of the block, you've accumulated enough fatigue that you're now doing easy runs at like an 8 or an 8:30 pace. As long as the key workouts have progressed, I think that's totally fine. And the
Yeah.
last thing I want to see is someone who starts a block like hitting 730 mile for their easy paces and they like hold themselves to that, or even worse, are trying to get faster. And then they're like, why am I struggling to progress these threshold sessions? Like you can't progress all seven of your runs, or all seven of your cardio sessions, or however many you're doing. Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I rambled a little bit there, but does that make sense?
No, that's so good. Honestly, it's actually such a good testament to. I feel like the people who are asking if they're going too slow in a zone two, like you don't have to worry about those people. It's usually the people that are asking for more zone two stuff that you're like, no, you could actually just like pick up the pace. Actually, yeah, you could. We need less zone two. It's so funny. Yeah, I love actually that you said moderate because this was something I want to talk to you about, Alec. Too. I'm like, I just want to hear. I want to hear you talk about. I feel like there's two camps. Like there's like the people who are like go hard all the time, which tends to usually they fall on the better side of performance. But then there's also the people who are like zone 2 is the most important. We need zone 2. And I understand that there are definitely arguments for both, but that happy middle of like yes, go hard, also zone 2, also like there's the middle sessions, also how long have you been running for and what's your training volume? I just think there's so much to consider. So I want to hear when I want to hear your thoughts on the zone 2 versus the go hard camps.
Yeah, I'll make an analogy to strength training because I feel like for some reason strength training makes more sense intuitively to a lot of people and then can like bridge the gap to endurance. But um, I was reading a good post from a powerlifter, Matt Vena, so shout out Matt. He was talking about how nowadays he does a lot of his training at like very low relative intensities with his competition lifts. Like he'll squat and deadlift at like RPE 4 and RPE 5, and he's like one of the best powerlifters in the world. Um, but like my general take on that is that like if you're someone who deadlifts 1,000 pounds, your RPE 4 is still really fucking heavy. You know what I mean? So like there's something to be said about like absolute load and absolute stress. And like if you take someone who's brand new to the gym, like I'm not going to take a one-on-one client like Gen Pop person who it's their first day in the gym and be like, all right, we're going to do some squats at RPE 4. Like they're not going to get shit out of that. And so I
Yep.
think like not all training scales like one to one. Like percentages don't scale across beginner to intermediate to advanced. Like we have to account for overall systemic stress. And I think that's a big reason why like we see a little bit of like a plateauing effect with easy runs where like there's plenty of like kind of moderately competitive endurance athletes who will do easy runs at like between a 7 and an 8 minute mile, which I think is generally fine. And then you have a lot of like professionals who like are racing marathons like an hour faster than them, also doing easy runs at like a 7 to 8 minute mile because it's like the absolute stress of their mileage and their high intensity work is just so much higher that something's got to give
Yep.
somewhere. And so like you can't just take a professional athlete's training program and like scale it all down. Like there's going to be things that don't scale one to one and look different depending on training level. And so when you're working with someone who is really well trained, really well conditioned, and they're capable of just like if you do say full send, like the effort that some of these people can give when you say full send is like terrifying. Like these people who can push that hard, like there's a ton of value in like our like just an interval workout that might only feel like an RPE 6. Like because even
Yep.
their RPE 6 is still really is still really fast, you know? Whereas like for most beginners, and like I said with the person new to the gym, I just want to see like let's see what failure looks like. You know what I mean? Like let's dial in like this is what failure looks like, this is what RPE 10 looks like, so that we have like a reference. For a newer runner who's like doing an interval session, I'm just gonna be like, just send it. Like you're not gonna accumulate that much fatigue in 4x800. Like you're just not. Like you just started
No.
running, like just let's just see what you got. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking of beginners, and then like with the advanced athletes, even moderate intensity workouts can still be really big stressors by the time they accumulate a lot of it. And then you get into this like weird middle ground with like some like moderately trained people where there's a lot of like it depends and I don't know, and like, well, what's your unique limiting factor, like what's going on with you, like are you time limited, are you recovery limited, is it orthopedic stress, is it overall fatigue and energy, like what's going on with you. Because I think for the beginner athlete, like generally the reason that a beginner can't do more is they're going to run into orthopedic issues. Like it's not that they crashed their hormones from pushing too hard, it's like they got shin
Yeah.
splints, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas the advanced athlete, like you, it's not impossible. Like advanced athletes do get injured, but like you don't see that stuff pop up as much. You don't see a lot of the overuse stuff pop up as much because they've just hardened their bodies after so many years of training. It's usually like, oh, you've been digging a little bit too deep on this session for too long, and now like your resting heart rate is elevated in the morning, and you're getting sick, and like you don't have any sex drive, and like those sorts of things, like, oh, you fucked up your hormones because you've been digging too deep on workouts. With people in the middle, it's like there's some of both, of like a little, like it just depends on the person. um so yeah, trying to figure out like what levers to pull and stuff for people in that like advanced intermediate range can be a little bit tricky sometimes. um but yeah, when it comes to zone two, that's another one of those tricky things where with the advanced athlete, it's almost you don't have to worry about it that much because like if you're training hard enough on your high quality days, I feel like you're going to be so tired and like so almost anxious or worried about being able to do the next hard day that you're probably going to behave like in between and be like, no, like I have a 13-mile like threshold workout tomorrow, I'm just chilling, you know. um and
Yep.
then on the easy side, I don't even think beginners need to worry about the zone 2 stuff so much. It's just like how hard can you push within your orthopedic tolerances. And then there's some gray area in the middle. I know it's kind of a long way of answering it, but hopefully that makes sense to people.
Yeah, no, the people in the middle is always kind of a good luck Charlie situation, I feel. It's like you just got to figure it out, man. But I do I it's what you were saying reminds me honestly of this. It was a post I think that went out. I don't know if it was an Instagram post or an article that I saw, but they're talking about these marathoners running their easy paces and how they're like, well, their easy paces are like two on their long runs are like 2 minutes on average faster than this other long run. And I'm kind of everyone was sitting there and they're like, so you need to run slower, looking at me like, hey, Abigail, you need to run slower. My clients love to tell me what to do when it comes to running because I yell at
Yeah.
them about lifting. And so, but I looked at them and I was like, I don't think that this is the same. This doesn't quite equate. Like I'm not accumulating enough stress in my session. I am still running easy. I promise you guys, when I go out there and I run this pace that I'm running, it still does feel easy. I'm just not that fucking fast. So
Yeah.
like my gaps are that big. Like there's only so slow I can go.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think if you're a beginner marathoner, like if you're someone who's trying to, break four, for example, so you're targeting like, 9:30 marathon pace for 4 hours, like if you're someone who can, run 9:30 pace for 4 hours, that is an easy pace. Like marathon pace is probably your easy pace. If you're a
Yeah.
2 hour marathoner running 4:37, like that's not an easy pace. you know like they're racing their marathon at like 96% of threshold, whereas like your 4 hour marathoner is probably racing their marathon at like 75 to 80% of threshold. So like if anything, we should scale things more according to threshold than like race pace. I think that'd at least be a better starting point for sure. And so if I was going to pick easy pace based off of threshold, I'd be like, all right, let's figure out what your lactate threshold pace is, and let's back off like 15% from there for an easy pace. Um, that'd be something I think is at least a little bit more reasonable. But even that's not perfect. Like we still have to account for the idea of absolute stress and total volume and all those sorts of things. But I think that would at least get us in more of the right ballpark. But yeah, I think that idea of like prioritizing zone two and it should be 2 minutes slower than race pace and all that kind of stuff is just another example of us like misapplying elite athlete training principles to not elite athletes, just like 80-20 or 90-10 or like whatever ratio it is. It's like if you're running 140 miles a week, yeah, maybe only 10 to 20% of that should be hard. But if you're only running 20 miles a week, probably most of that should be relatively challenging, you know?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think also too, there's something to what you're talking about the accumulated fatigue over a training block, and so thus like your easy pace is changing. I mean, that's when I paces are cool and important, and they do matter. They matter the most though on race day. And my coach, the running coach that I've been working with, and it seems like you also apply this same thing. It's like you look at pace to observe, but really, like in a lot of your training block, I feel like you're going off of, as long as you're adhering to true feel, like you're kind of going off of an RPE scale, which is like,
Yeah.
what am I feeling? This is where my threshold is. This is how I'm feeling. This is above my threshold. It's a speed day. This makes sense. This is a long, like, you're kind of like just actually cueing in on what the fuck your body's supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, even like, some of the lactate guided stuff, like some of the Norwegians doing the like, pricking their ear like between every interval, they'll adjust their paces based off their lactate readings and stuff like that versus just sticking to the exact pace regardless. Um, but like you can do that with RPE too. You can be like, that one felt a little too hard, I'm gonna go slower, or I'm feeling good, I'm gonna go a little bit faster. Like, just they might have the technology, they have the $400 sensor and the Lancets and everything like that, but like there's no reason that you can't just change your workout on the fly based off of how you're feeling versus sticking to the, your race pace no matter what.
Yeah. What would you say, Alec, are the big meaty sessions for half marathon or marathon training? Like what are the two, like, dude, if I could just apply this across, like, for a moderate, pretty decent runner, like, this is what they need in their program.
So maybe a non-standard answer here, because I think the most important thing, just like broadly speaking, is just big workouts. And by big workouts, I mean like workouts that have you running fast in like sessions over 10 miles. And like I almost don't care that much what it is. I just want to like if I want to know if someone's prepared to like race a good marathon or half marathon, I'm like, okay, can you put in work after 10 miles? Period. Like in a 10 to 13 mile session, can you accumulate a lot of threshold volume? Can I, like I have a session right now that's I'll do like 4 or 5 miles at marathon pace, which is not horrible, and then I'll do 10 by 800. So I'm like doing 10 by 800 pretty deep into a workout and pretty fatigued. And it's nasty. Um, but it's not like that close to, like in terms of the actual pace, I wouldn't consider it the most marathon specific workout, but like I'm running fast at like mile 11. And to me,
Right.
that's what makes something marathon specific is like, can you run fast in a big workout? So I think that's one of the most like undervalued things is just like, do you have workouts in that like 10 to 14 mile range that are hard? Um, I think that's the single most important thing. To get a little bit more specific, I'd probably just dial in on like, accumulating a lot of threshold volume in a fairly lengthy session. Um, so, like say a 14-mile session, accumulate 6 to 8 miles at threshold or half marathon pace. I think that's a great target to shoot for. Um, that'd be a great target to shoot for relatively close to a half marathon, maybe a little further out from a marathon, and then closer to a marathon, just like accumulating probably 10 to 14 miles worth of marathon pace work in a long run that's like 16 to 20 miles. I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. Um, but kind of like we were talking about with workouts not always scaling, I think that a lot of workouts that like the same workout on paper is harder the more advanced you are. So like
Yeah.
if I say like, 14 miles at marathon pace, like for a novice, 14 miles at marathon pace is not like it's not easy, but it's not really that bad. Um, but like 14 miles at marathon pace for someone really well trained is like a pretty scary workout. Like the idea of doing 14 miles at marathon pace sounds awful, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that's something that people should consider too, just like when they're looking at workouts or hearing people talk about workouts, like who's the audience and the training level for this, because you might need to skew that workout a little bit for the desired training effect. And in general, like these workouts should be hard. So like one of my favorite marathon workouts that I did in my last prep block was I did 10 miles a little bit slower than marathon pace. So I think I did like 10 miles at 6:45. And then I alternated for 10 more miles between a mile faster than marathon pace at like 6 minute mile and then a mile easy at like 7 or 7:15. Um, but like that workout, it was doable for me. I think if like a really advanced, like, 2:15 marathoner tried to do the same workout at the same relative paces, I think it would be way too hard, you know? And it's like, it sounds kind of backwards that like a more advanced athlete would think the same workout that I'm doing is too hard. But again, like paces don't scale perfectly. So if someone was going to go copy that workout, I wouldn't have them do those exact same paces. I would more describe like this is how it should feel, rather than like this should be marathon pace. This should be 20 seconds faster than marathon pace. It's like we're just going for feel, not not super specific paces. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's cool because Katie answered the question that I asked you in essentially the same way, which was she had one speed day where she would show up and she would do mileage before and then she'd do intervals at the track with us. So she would go and do like essentially like 2 mile repeats and then she would do like rip a bunch of 400s after. And then she had a long workout over the weekend where she was doing, 18 to 22 miles and she would have marathon pace interwoven in. It's like literally the exact same answer as you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the like the long runs and stuff, marathon pace long runs, that's obviously important, especially in the latter stages, like closer to race day. Like the last 12 weeks of a prep should have some good marathon pace miles in there. But I think the big thing for like people that want to stay prepared for ultras and marathons like year round is just like speed workouts don't have to be super short. Like if you want to do an anaerobic session and just like, you know, go do like 10 by 200, like you can do sprint workouts, you can do anaerobic workouts, like that all has a place. You can do some like hill sprints at the end of an easy run. All that's fine. But I think the bread and butter of like endurance training is just long workouts that are difficult. Which
That
sounds dumb, but like long workouts that are difficult is what it's all about.
yeah, that was and that sums up the entire podcast. Do hardship for a long time. I did want to go ask you one more question about, and this actually gets into lifting. I'm gonna give you this question, and I'm just gonna let you take it where you want. Okay. But the
Okay.
question is, what really is movement quality?
That's a question.
I
Um,
know.
um, I mean, like movement quality, like quality is uh an attribute that we would assign to like a specific technique, right? And so if we're talking about movement quality, we're really talking about technique. And the way I see it, like technique can serve one of a couple of purposes. One, it can serve like to meet some sort of external criteria. So there's like competition technique where you have to do it this way just because we said so. So that's one element of technique. So in that sense, movement quality is going to be like what movement accomplishes the competition task the most efficiently or most effectively. So in that case, it really has nothing to do with like what's going on in your body. It's just what gives us the best desired performance outcome. Um, the other way to look at it would be in terms of uh, like tissue development. So does this technique train the tissue that we're trying to train? And then lastly, people will think about things like injury, which I think kind of falls into that same bucket of tissue. Like technique is just a way to bias certain tissue, and certain technique maybe doesn't bias the tissue that we want it to, or it introduces potential limiting factors that are going to be counterproductive to our goal. So if you think about like, rounding your back in an RDL, is it good or bad? One, maybe rounding your back so much in an RDL that it's no longer RDL just doesn't meet the performance objective of like you're not doing the exercise that we wanted you to do. You're doing something else, which is fine. It's just not what we intended for you to do. Uh, but I think that's where people mess up too, is they like tell people they're doing something wrong instead of like, no, you're just doing something different. And then people
Yeah.
get like
Oh yeah.
worried about like, oh, I'm not doing this right, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you're just doing a different exercise. That's not the one that we have in the program for today. Uh, but then in terms of like tissue, if we think about that like round back RDL from a tissue perspective, we're just putting more load into the spinal erectors and that sort of thing, and potentially introducing limiting factors like, fatigue in your back or that sort of thing that prevents us from training the tissue that we were trying to train, which is your glutes and your hamstrings. So in the context of an RDL, we could say that's low quality movement because it's not developing the quality and developing the tissue that we want. But I think anytime we talk about movement quality, we have to talk about it in that specific context. So I don't think we can ever say like this is good movement or this is bad movement in terms of quality. It's like for this specific objective and in this specific context, that's not the quality that we're looking for. So I think there's better words in the English language that communicate what we're trying to get across more effectively than quality. Because when we say things like quality, I think it inherently applies this sort of like broad sweeping characteristic to it rather than getting the point across that it is very context specific. So I've never been a big fan of the use of movement quality because if you use that word, you almost have to follow it up with a bunch of like caveats and the like of like for this exercise, for this goal, for this person, blah blah blah. Or when we keep it a little bit more, I think, performance oriented and use things like, technical efficiency and those sorts of things, it makes it very clear that it's like, oh, this is about a specific objective and it's not me being a good person or bad person kind of thing. Because I don't think there's a lot of cases where movement is like inherently something to be avoided or something that's inherently maladaptive. I think the only time that I would consider something kind of maladaptive is just if there's a lack of variability in movement options. So if I'm working with someone and they round their back a lot on their RDLs and they good morning their squats and like everything they do defaults to the same exact movement strategy, it doesn't make that movement strategy bad, but it does present a load management issue in the sense that like everything you do in the gym is falling back on the same tissue and the same strategy. So we're overloading that tissue and we're leaving a lot of other things underexposed and underdeveloped. So that's a case where I'd say, your technique isn't bad, your movement quality isn't bad, but we do really need to explore some more options so that we can, be a more well-rounded person and share some of that load across more tissue. So that's about the only time I would say something is maladaptive in a sense, is just through that variability lens. But otherwise, I think taking more of a just kind of performance-oriented approach and what's the tissue we're trying to train? Let's adjust our technique for that, and it's all good and all serves a purpose.
Yeah. It's interesting too because honestly, I feel like movement quality wouldn't be a bad word if it was like only chill coaches who understood this kind of concept were chatting, but everybody in the comments just has such a stick up their ass, and I don't know, like I don't understand why some coaches argue, because I see it in your comments, like it's just stupid, like they're missing the entire point because they were wanting to argue over the minutia of some like word choice that you used, and I'm like, this, you literally didn't get the point of the post at all.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think you see that with it's a trickle down effect because you have coaches that want to look smart and just like show off their technical expertise, or like they were there like 90 years ago when this exercise was invented and they want to tell you about like all the famous people they know or some shit. So you get a lot of that of just like everyone wanting to look smarter than you, especially like the more of a name you make for yourself and like the more followers you have, for example, like everyone wants their in to be like, I'm smarter than this person. I should have that much success or that many followers. And it's like, you're just missing the point about what like fitness communication is about at that point, I think. But you end up with these people, and then a lot of like reaction style content, and a lot of content that gets into the minutia and is very like comparison driven, um, and then that trickles down into like how people view fitness, and they view it as like the minutia really really matters, and the like the little details of like whether I tucked my chin on this exercise or not is like life and death level of importance. And
Yeah.
like it's not that we can't talk about those things, but like the level of seriousness in which we go about it, and like I think just being able to effectively communicate like effect sizes and like contextualize things and be like, this is how much this thing matters. So it's like, we can talk about it, about like why you might want to do it this way or that way, but like just so we're clear, big picture wise, this is only going to affect your results like 0.5% at best, kind of thing. Like, I think we need more of that sort of communication, of just like reminding people like these are the big rocks. This is what matters for this movement. These are a couple like small technical things that, maybe this feels better to you, maybe it doesn't. This is in theory what it would do. Try it out and see how it feels for yourself. Um, but I don't know. I think everyone just wants everything to be really important, because at the end of the day, like, especially with technique, with most people's goals who like aren't trying to compete on a national stage or anything like that, they just want to get generally strong, generally fit, and have a good life. Technique is just not that important. I never want to say it's unimportant or doesn't matter at all, because then people will strawman me. But like it's far from the most important thing. Like you can lift with a very wide range of techniques, use a very wide range of exercises, and your general fitness and strength and quality of life is going to be amazing no matter what. So like for 99.9% of people, technique is like trivially important. Um, but coaches, people like us, who it's like what we do for a living, we want that job security. We want to talk about how important all
Yeah.
the things are. Um, and I think that what happens, and why that happens, is people like basically insecure coaches that don't have enough interpersonal skills, knowledge of load management, knowledge of all the other things that coaches do. If you take away that technical side, and you're like, what are you as a coach if technique isn't that important? I think for a lot of people, like their entire identity crumbles, because they aren't actually good at all of the other things that are really important about this job. And yeah, we need to be able to coach that technique for the right person in the right circumstance, and like, address like, oh, you have pain here, here's how we can modify the technique, or you're training for this competition, this technique matters. Like all that stuff is part of the job sometimes. But 99% of the time, like you strip that away, and I think a lot of coaches struggle with their identity, and that's why people have so many strong feelings about it.
That is so well put. Yeah, coaches online sometimes forget what coaching, the whole like actual personal part of personal training is. Um, but I wanted to ask you before you go, I want to know what like long term your goals are for competing in your business, because I know you're like running around everywhere, you're filming stuff, you're doing crazy freaking workouts, you're Olympic lifting like a freak. I know you're probably going to do Apex again. So like what long term uh does Alec Blenis like really want to do in terms of fitness and also your business?
Oh man. I
You
mean
don't have to have you don't have to know exactly, because none of us really know, but like I want to know your dreams, Alec.
yeah. I mean, on the business side, um, I mean, definitely doing a lot of things. I would say short-term goal, I'm working on a book, which is something I've wanted to do for a long time and just never like gotten around to it or like dedicating the time for it. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, being able to actually share my written thoughts, because I feel like I'm a better writer than speaker. So I'd much rather like write a
Yeah.
book than like go do presentations or something like that. So I think that'll be fun. I think ultimately just like a lot of coaches' dreams is to like make enough money that I can open my own space that's like just like for me. Not, I don't want to like open my own gym with like members, but just like have a space with sick equipment, like fly people out
Yes.
to come train with me, interview them, shoot some content, and just like have that personal space, podcast studio, like kind of invitation only sort of gym situation. I think it'd be super cool. So that would be the dream in terms of like financial success. Hopefully, hopefully the book will help with that, continuing to promote programs and coaching, all that kind of stuff. But I'd say that would be the ultimate dream. In terms of my fitness, it's crazy. There's so much like seasonal fluctuation. Like my goals shift a little bit year to year. I'm really loving the cardio side of things right now. Um, I think it'd be cool to try to hit, get under 230 for a marathon at some point. I feel like 240 is in the cards this year. But with the volume I've been putting in now, like progress is really good. Workouts are progressing like super steadily, which has been crazy to see. Because I would have not thought that I would have made as fast of progress as I have from like 250 down to 240 shape probably right now. So I'm hoping to just kind of
Yeah.
keep that momentum going. Um, on the strength side of things, my I don't have a lot of goals on the strength side of things, honestly. If you had asked me a year ago, I probably would have. And now, like, I was actually talking about this to my wife yesterday on a walk. It was like, to me, with the endurance side of things, if I get a little bit faster, like when I start seeing some progress in my workouts, I like feel better. Like just walking around on the day-to-day basis, like after hitting a cool running PR, like I don't know, I like feel the result of that like on a daily
Yes.
basis more than I do. Like I go to the gym, I add 5 pounds to a lift, and I'm like, I feel the exact same. Like I'm strong enough that like adding more strength is not changing how I feel in my day-to-day life. It's cool and I love the process of lifting and like trying to get better at those skills and everything, but like it ultimately doesn't impact my life that much. Whereas for some reason, like even like I'm definitely more than aerobically fit enough to do like all that life asks of me, but I still feel like the faster I get, the better I feel. It doesn't stop, which I think is crazy. Like feeling better, at with like a 540 threshold pace and with a 6 minute threshold pace. It's like I feel it in my day-to-day life. It's nuts. Um, so I think just leaning into that of like I'm gonna try to stay as strong as I am. If I just maintain my current strength, honestly, for like the next 10 years, I'd be pretty satisfied if I continued to chip away at the endurance side of things. But maybe if I'm lucky, I'll pack on a few more pounds of mass. That'd be cool.
Dude, I think that's so great. I fully agree with you in terms of there's nothing since starting. I'm much newer to the endurance running space. I trained jujitsu for 4 years. I've always been into like conditioning and things like that. I did the CrossFit stuff. I was lifting, but there's nothing that feels better than when you feel your fitness, like you feel your fitness increase. And from running, like mile training was brutal, but I walked around and I was like, I feel so fit right now. Like I
Yeah.
feel so good. And I think it's also like it's such an expression too in your physique. Like there's a certain level of leanness when you're running and you're really fit where you just feel good. Like when I was lifting heavy, I always said this. I said when I do a lot of lifting, I feel like I look my best. I said but when I do a lot of conditioning, I feel like I feel my best. And
Yeah.
that's like how it has always been, and I think it's how like I love lifting. I still think it's so fun. I know you do too because you slam weights around like just a madman. You're so insane. But Blaine's the same way. Like he'll talk about and he's like if I get a PR in a lift, like it's cool, but if he PRs in like a 40 time, he's
Yeah.
freaking out. Like he's like, this is the best day of all time. Um, but I'm so excited that you're writing a book, Alec. I think it's going to be extremely successful. I feel like your Instagram posts, I almost get like I almost hate that you post on Instagram, and it's not because you post, it's because I want to get more context from you. Like I want to get more content and also or I'm just scrolling real quick and I'm not actually and I'm like, fuck, I want to read this, but like I don't have time to it and really like you put so much thought into your post, you know? And so I'm so pumped that you're going to write a book because I think that it's going to be extremely successful and it's also like that is your skill. If anybody follows you on if you don't follow Alec Blenis on Instagram, follow him on Instagram. But like if anybody follows you on Instagram, I'm sure they would agree.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. I wish that I could be as good at like speaking and articulating things in spoken form as writing, but for some reason I've always been really drawn to the writing side of things. So I'm excited to be able to like sit and organize all my thoughts and like get something together. I think people will really like it. And if not, it will at least be something to keep me busy for a
Well,
while.
what's the book going to be about? Do you have any topic ideas or?
Yeah, so tentative working title, maybe I'll change it, maybe I won't, is the hybrid conditioning manual. So it's going to be just all about
Ooh.
conditioning focus with a little bit of a hybrid spin. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into the strength training side of things in this. It's just going to be very conditioning oriented, but with some like special attention paid to like conditioning around strength and for kind of hybrid athletes and that sort of thing. But yeah, very like broad topic of conditioning in general. Uh, yeah.
I am really excited. Do you have any kind of, I know there's no, it's all general and this is like you putting it out there, but is there any date like people can sort of hover around like 2027, 2028,
Oh,
2026?
it'll be sooner than that. I'm thinking I'd like to get it out by March of this coming year. So it's like 6, 7 months out. I think it'd be cool. If I don't get it in time, no, don't send me hate mail or anything like that. But that's what I'm shooting for.
Dude, you're late. I've been waiting. Well, you're also too humble because you're an incredible speaker. I love listening to you on podcasts. I listened to the Coach 'em Up episode the other day, yesterday. I think it came out yesterday. I listened to it yesterday. And you're extremely well spoken. There are people that are good podcasters and there are people that just do podcasts, and you are a good podcaster.
I appreciate that. Thank you. You were a great host. Thanks for having me today. Happy to field any like last closing questions if you have any, but otherwise I had a great time. Thank you.
No, I have no other questions. Alec, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks.